The broken crown that became a shield part there, ashes of a king. There are battles that end with silence, and there are battles that echo across centuries. This one was both. The sky over Carthan Prime burned like a funeral pyre. What had once been the jewel world of the Ver Dominion now lay in ruin. Oceans boiled with radiation storms, cities sank into fractured crust, and the throne of an alien king cracked beneath the weight of humanity's final assault. Admiral Kalen Vane had never seen anything like it, not in all the decades of war that had carved scars into the Milky Way. When the last blast tore through the obsidian fortress of the alien sovereign, he stood on the deck of the human flagship Resolute Dawn, his chest rising and falling with a rhythm that was not triumph, not relief, but something heavier. The alien king had been called Sovereign Mathar, bearer of the 1,000 crowns. A tyrant who had ruled not only his people but entire galaxies through the sheer terror of his reign. His armies had enslaved human colonies, burned newborn settlements into ash, and raised monuments to remind the stars who their master was. And yet when the battle was done, when the dust had thinned and the silence of victory lay across the stars, what remained of him was not a god, not a monster, but a crown. It was no simple ornament. Forged from metals unknown to human science, it shimmered with alien radiance, fractured but unbroken, its points jagged like the teeth of some cosmic predator. Soldiers who found it dared not touch it at first. They circled it like wolves, their rifles drawn, as though the object itself might strike back. The decision came from the council before the blood of the fallen had even dried. The crown would not be kept as a relic, nor as a trophy, nor as an artifact of study. It would be reforged, melted in the furnaces of Titan, hammered by the greatest smiths of Mars, reforged into something new, something that would carry meaning far beyond a battlefield. They called it the Aegis of Dawn, a shield unlike any other, fused into the very hull of the Resolute Dawn, humanity's flagship. To their allies, it was hope incarnate, a symbol that no throne, however ancient, was safe from human hands. To their enemies, it was mockery carved into steel, a constant reminder that the crown of the unconquerable king now guarded the very fleet that had slain him. But for Kalen Vane, it was something more. He had seen the eyes of Sovereign Mathar in the final moments, burning not with rage, not even with fear, but with something disturbingly human, grief. And grief, Kalen knew, was never the end of a story. As the shield cooled on the ship's prow, the admiral found himself staring at the stars, feeling as though something vast and unfinished still watched from beyond. The war might have ended here, but the echoes of a fallen crown had only just begun. The shield of mockery. The ceremony was held in orbit above Titan, beneath the pale light of Saturn's rings. Billions watched across human space as the molten fragments of Sovereign Mathar's crown were poured into the crucible of Mars-forged steel. The world held its breath as fire consumed royalty. There was silence, and then the sound of hammers, measured, unyielding, like the pulse of destiny itself. Each strike rang out across the vacuum of the transmission, each note a declaration. The age of tyrants had ended, and humanity would not kneel again. When it was finished, the object bore no trace of its former shape. Gone were the cruel spires that had once crowned the brow of the Dominion's king. In its place was a surface of liquid silver, engraved with runes both alien and human, a shield vast enough to be mounted across the prow of a warship. The council named it the Aegis of Dawn. The Resolute Dawn bore it first, gleaming at the ship's heart like a star captured in iron. Every time the vessel entered a system, the shield caught the light of nearby suns and threw it back into the void, a blinding flare that reminded allies of victory and enemies of humiliation, yet symbols cut in more than one direction. The first time the Resolute Dawn arrived in the Avaron expanse, human settlers cheered. They filled the commnet with chants, songs, and prayers, as though salvation itself had descended from orbit. To them, the shield was no mere alloy. It was justice welded into existence, a promise that their oppressors could bleed. But among the Ver's surviving fleets, the sight was poison. Scouts fled at the mere flash of its surface. Captains abandoned posts, entire squadrons scattering into the dark. The Dominion had worshipped their sovereign as divine, and now divinity itself was affixed to the prow of the enemy who had slain him. To them, this was desecration, a sacrilege that screamed louder than death. The council knew exactly what they had done. Symbols were weapons sharper than blades. A broken crown reforged into humanity's shield told the galaxy one thing: no throne was beyond their reach. But Kalen Vane, Admiral, Victor, hero of Carthan Prime, saw something different when he stood before the shield. It was not triumph he felt, nor pride. It was unease. Each time his eyes caught the shimmering alloy, he remembered the last breath of Mathar. The alien king had fallen not with curses, not with boasts, but with a gaze heavy as stone, a gaze filled with the sorrow of a father burying his children. Kalen had killed monsters before, but monsters did not grieve. Monsters did not die with silence thick as morning. And though the crown was gone, though it had been torn and melted, something of that gaze remained. The alloy glimmered strangely in the dark, as though memory itself clung to it. Engineers joked that the shield hummed at night. Some swore they heard whispers through the hull when the Resolute Dawn drifted between stars. Kalen did not laugh. He only watched and listened and wondered. The war had ended, but wars did not die cleanly. They lingered like scars, like embers that waited for breath to rise again. One evening, when the Resolute Dawn lay anchored in the silent void of a neutral system, Kalen walked alone to the viewing deck. The shield loomed before him, vast and cold. He reached out a hand and pressed his palm against the alloy, feeling its strange warmth beneath the chill of steel. For the briefest heartbeat, he thought he felt a pulse. A crown broken, a shield born, a story unfinished. Far beyond the edge of human space, in the broken remnants of the Dominion, something stirred. The throne was gone. But thrones, like crowns, had a way of returning. Embers of the fallen history does not vanish when a throne is shattered. It smolders restless in the ashes. The death of sovereign Mathar and the forging of the Aegis of Dawn had not merely ended a war. It had torn open the heart of the galaxy. The Vare Dominion, once a lattice of iron discipline stretching across 200 star systems, collapsed overnight. Worlds that had lived under Dominion banners for centuries found themselves unmoored. Some rejoiced, lifting human flags in defiance, their chains falling at last. Others descended into chaos, once bound civilizations tearing themselves apart in sudden freedom. And in the cracks, in the shadows where power had no master, warlords began to rise. Admiral Kalen Vane saw it all unfold in reports that flowed endlessly into the council chambers. He had thought the war's end would bring silence. Instead, the galaxy screamed. The shield of the Resolute Dawn became a torch. On newly liberated colonies, children drew its outline on walls. Rebels on Vare-controlled outposts painted it across stolen armors. Its gleam became more than iron. It became the very symbol of rebellion. But not all fire warms. Some fire devours. From the ruins of the Dominion came whispers, rumors of loyalist fleets that had not surrendered, captains who still carried Mathar's banners into the void. Stories of cults that worshipped the slain king not as dead but as ascended. They claimed his crown had not truly been broken, only transformed, that the essence of sovereignty itself could never be destroyed. Kalen listened, silent, as intelligence officers recited the tales. "They believe the shield is cursed," one of them said, "that every time the Resolute Dawn sails they hear the king's voice echo through the stars." The admiral said nothing, but his thoughts drifted back to the hum of alloy beneath his palm, the phantom heartbeat he had felt in the silence of space. Curses were superstition, and yet, superstition was often the shape truth wore before science caught up. The Aegis of Dawn gleamed like a god's eye in the dark, and wherever it shone, rebellion flared. Entire fleets rose against their Dominion masters at the sight of it. But in the same breath, Dominion loyalists grew more rabid, more desperate, more willing to burn entire systems to ashes rather than let their king's memory be mocked. Thus, the galaxy fractured not into peace but into war without end, a war of symbols, a war of memory. Kalen carried the weight of it in silence. He had been hailed a hero, the one who had brought the sovereign to his knees. Yet in his chest he felt no pride, only a dread that deepened with each report of uprisings, each whisper of Mathar's return. One night, as the Resolute Dawn sailed through the dark between systems, Kalen stood again before the shield. It caught the faint light of a distant star, glowing faintly as though embers smoldered within. And for the first time he thought he heard a voice. Not clear, not words, just a presence deep and resonant like the rumble of tectonic plates beneath an ocean. His heart seized. His hand gripped the railing, and in that soundless vibration, that ghostly hum, he thought he understood what Sovereign Mathar's final gaze had meant. Grief was not an end. It was a seed. The king had not died to nothing. He had left behind a crown, broken but breathing, a legacy melted into steel, carried now at the heart of the enemy's fleet. And seeds, when buried in fire, grow strange. The admiral turned away, his jaw tight, his eyes shadowed. He told no one of what he felt. Not the council, not his crew, not even himself in the quiet honesty of his thoughts. But deep in the ruins of the Dominion, where forgotten temples glowed beneath shattered skies, loyalists lit their fires and raised their banners. And in the smoke, in the chants of billions who mourned their god-king, the embers of a fallen crown began to breathe again. The war had ended, but the story of the crown was only beginning. The siege of Silent Ash, the Resolute Dawn had been summoned to quell an uprising in the Silent Ash Belt, a string of mineral worlds once under Dominion rule. On most maps they were gray and insignificant, nothing more than rocks orbiting nameless stars. But in the fracture of empire, even forgotten stones could bleed rivers of fire. When the flagship emerged from warp, Kalen Vane stood at the bridge's prow. Beyond the viewport stretched a graveyard of ships, dozens of wrecks drifting in silence, their hulls blackened, their crews long dead. The uprising had been swift and brutal. Dominion loyalists had swept through the belt like a storm, annihilating settlements that dared to raise the human banner. But this was not what unsettled the admiral. It was the beacon. A transmission pulsed from the largest of the wrecks, repeating in intervals steady as a heartbeat. The message was short, guttural, carried in the harsh tones of the Vare language. The translators rendered it into human tongue. The crown is not broken. The sovereign is not gone. He watches from the shield you carry. The crew exchanged wary glances. Some muttered prayers. Others avoided looking at the aegis, which glimmered faintly at the prow as though answering the call. Kalen said nothing. His jaw tightened, his hand gripping the railing until his knuckles whitened. The council had given him clear orders. Crush the loyalists. Restore order. Prove once more that no throne was safe from humanity's reach. But as the fleet advanced, Kalen felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing against him. The crown's presence lingered in the alloy, silent and watchful. The first clash came swiftly. Dominion loyalists, their ships marked with symbols of mourning, fell upon the Resolute Dawn with the desperation of zealots. They moved like shadows cutting through asteroid fields, striking with suicidal precision. But the aegis of Dawn held. Energy bolts that should have torn through human shields instead dispersed in showers of fractured light. Plasma fire seared across its surface and left no scar. Each impact sent a resonance echoing through the ship, a low, thrumming vibration that sank into the bones of every soul aboard. The crew began to whisper. They claimed the shield was drinking the attacks, hungering for them. Some swore the humming resolved into words. Others said they saw visions in the flare of the impacts. Vast thrones, burning skies, a king with eyes like molten stone. Kalen heard it too. During the thick of the battle, when the Resolute Dawn stood alone against 6 Dominion cruisers, he felt the hum in his chest. It pulsed like a second heartbeat, drowning out the roar of combat. And in the pulse he heard a voice not with ears but with something deeper. You carry me, usurper. You carry my crown upon your spear. You carry my grief into war. The admiral's hand froze above the tactical display. Sweat chilled his spine. He forced himself to focus on commands, on maneuvers, on survival. But the voice lingered, pressing against the edge of his mind. And when the last Dominion ship fell, when the ashes of the silent belt settled into cold silence, Kalen felt no victory. Only dread, for the shield had not been silent. It had spoken. The crew celebrated, their relief spilling into cheers across the comnet. The council transmitted congratulations, lauding Kalen as a hero once more. The Resolute Dawn stood unbeaten, radiant in the firelight of destroyed enemies. But Kalen remained still, his gaze fixed on the shield's shimmering surface. The broken crown had been reforged into humanity's glory, but in its heart something lived still, something that had not yielded in death. And though he tried to push the thought away, Kalen could not escape the truth. The war had not ended with the fall of sovereign Mathar. It had only changed shape. The weight of silence, the Silent Ash campaign should have ended in triumph. The Resolute Dawn had shattered the last of the Dominion's loyalists in the belt, extinguishing their banners in fire. Yet when the flagship returned to human space, its crew did not sing. They whispered. Whispers carried down the corridors like smoke, elusive yet inescapable. Crew members avoided the prow decks at night. Engineers refused to perform routine maintenance on the Aegis of Dawn unless ordered. Even the most disciplined officers found themselves hesitating when their eyes fell on the shield. It was not fear of enemies. It was fear of what lingered within. Kalen Vane felt it most of all. He could not escape the hum. At first he thought it was fatigue, the echo of stress in a body long wrung dry by war. But then he realized it followed him everywhere, through the bridge, the barracks, the silence of his private quarters. Always the same low vibration, steady as a drumbeat. At times the hum thickened into meaning. Half-heard phrases slipped into his mind like knives in water. You carry my grief. You carry my crown. You carry my silence. He tried to ignore them. He buried himself in reports, strategies, orders. But silence cannot be commanded, and grief does not yield. The council summoned him to Mars for commendation, their voices bright with pride. You are the shield-bearer of humanity, they declared. Our enemies see you in despair. Our allies see you in rise. Kalen bowed, spoke words of duty, and left. But inside his chest was hollow. He knew the council saw only the shine of the Aegis, not the shadow within it. The shadow grew darker in the weeks that followed. Crew morale began to falter. Sleep was restless. Men and women woke with screams, claiming they had seen the sovereign in dreams, his broken crown hovering above their beds, his voice commanding them to kneel. Medical officers dismissed it as trauma, residue from years of war. But Kalen knew better. He too dreamed. He dreamed of thrones forged from bone, of oceans of ash, of a king walking barefoot across fields of silence. The king never struck, never shouted. He only looked, his eyes burning with endless mourning. And each time Kalen woke, the hum of the shield echoed louder, as if to remind him the dream was no dream at all. Divisions began to appear within the crew. Some grew superstitious, believing the Aegis of Dawn was haunted. They refused to serve near it, begged for transfer to other ships. Others, disturbingly, began to worship it. They touched the shield when passing, muttered oaths beneath their breath, and claimed the sovereign still lived within it, guiding their strikes, ensuring their victories. Kalen summoned his officers, demanding discipline, but their eyes betrayed them. Even among the highest ranks, the shield's presence had seeded doubt. Humanity's greatest symbol was becoming its greatest fracture. One night, when the Resolute Dawn drifted in the quiet between stars, Kalen stood alone in the prow chamber. The shield loomed before him, vast and glimmering. His reflection stared back, distorted, as if the alloy remembered another face, and then the hum grew stronger. It shook the air, rattled the bones, pressed against the marrow of his being. He dropped to one knee, breath caught in his throat as a voice bloomed within him. Not faint now, not half-formed, clear, resonant, commanding. You thought me ended, usurper. You thought fire could melt sovereignty, but crowns do not die. They bend, they endure. And you... The voice coiled into his skull, heavy with sorrow, heavy with wrath. You carry me. Kalen staggered back, clutching the railing, his chest burning. The chamber fell silent once more, but the truth had been spoken. The crown was not broken. It had only changed shape, and humanity, in its triumph, had bound itself to the grief of a king. Kalen pressed his palm to the cold alloy, his breath trembling in the stillness. The shield shone faintly, as though lit by embers unseen, and in that glow, he understood the dread that had haunted him since Carthan Prime. The war was not over. It had only crossed a threshold. The galaxy would soon discover that the crown humanity had melted into a shield was not a symbol of victory. It was a vessel. The crown's shadow symbols are dangerous things. They inspire, they unite, they terrify. But above all, they spread. When the Council forged the Aegis of Dawn, they believed they had crafted a weapon of victory. They had not understood that they had also crafted a vessel of memory. The whispers began in the colonies first. Miners in the Kuros belt reported dreams of a broken crown mended by fire, Farmers on Aegir Prime swore they saw visions of a king walking the fields at dusk, leaving no prints in the soil. Pilots spoke of hearing voices in the static between stars. At first, the council dismissed these as superstition, the residue of war echoing in exhausted minds. But as the months passed, the reports multiplied, spreading across systems like plague, and always. The whispers carried the same refrain: the sovereign is not gone. The Resolute Dawn became a moving epicenter. Wherever it sailed, disturbances followed. Rebellions rose not against humanity, but in strange devotion to the shield itself, to the presence it carried. Dominion survivors gathered in sects, chanting beneath banners painted with the outline of the Aegis. Even among humanity's allies, unease began to stir. If this shield can hold the soul of a king, one ambassador asked, what else does it carry? Kalen Vane saw it all from the bridge, his heart a forge of silence. Reports piled upon his desk like ash, each one heavier than the last. He had not told the council of the voice. He had not told them that the shield spoke, that its hum carried sorrow and command alike. He feared what they might do if they knew, feared they would silence him, or worse, attempt to silence the shield. And he knew, with a dread that hollowed his bones, that the shield would not be silenced. The Resolute Dawn's crew was no longer united. Some clung to discipline, holding the line out of loyalty to Kalen. Others avoided the prow altogether, whispering prayers and curses in the same breath. But a growing number had begun to listen. They claimed the sovereign had not been their enemy at all, but their liberator, misunderstood, betrayed, cast down by those who feared him. They touched the shield when they thought no one was watching, leaving offerings, coins, scraps of cloth, even drops of blood. Kalen ordered such acts forbidden, but the ban only drove them deeper into secrecy. The admiral could not fight shadows within his own ship. And worse, he could not fight what was happening within himself. Each night, when he closed his eyes, the dreams came. He stood in halls of obsidian, the crown floating before him, its jagged spires whole once more. Mathar's voice echoed from the dark, not screaming, not demanding, but grieving. Always grieving. I ruled to protect, the voice whispered. I ruled to bind chaos into order. And you, usurper, tore the crown from my brow. Now you carry what you destroyed. Now you carry me. Kalen would wake drenched in sweat, his chest aching as though the hum of the shield had fused with his own heartbeat. He began to wonder if it had. The council continued to hail him as a hero. Each broadcast, each medal, each ceremony was a mask he could no longer wear without trembling. They saw victory when they looked at him. He saw only shadow. Then came the message that changed everything. A fleet had been sighted in the ruins of the Dominion's core. Not scattered warlords, not cultists, but a united force. Dozens of ships bearing a single symbol, a broken crown mended with fire painted across their hulls in blood-red strokes. They did not call themselves the Dominion. They called themselves the Sovereign's Return, and their first transmission, sent openly across all channels, was simple. You carry him, humanity. You carry our king. You are his vessel, not his victor. We come not to destroy you, but to reclaim him. Kalen stood frozen as the words echoed across the bridge. His crew shifted uneasily, eyes turning toward the prow, toward the shield that gleamed faintly in the light of distant stars. The admiral's chest tightened. For the first time since Carthan Prime, he felt the galaxy tilting beneath his feet. The shield was no longer a symbol of victory. It was a beacon, and something in the dark had begun to answer its call. The voice in the fire. The fleet that called itself the Sovereign's Return did not crawl like raiders. It advanced with purpose in lines that mirrored the Dominion of old. When the Resolute Dawn arrived in the burned-out system of Ver-Ka, Kalen Vane expected chaos, ragged warships stitched from wreckage, cultists screaming into the void. What he found instead was discipline, order, a fleet rebuilt in the image of a fallen empire and painted across every hull. Every banner, every armor plate was the same mark, a broken crown, mended with flame. The return hailed first. Their transmission filled the Resolute Dawn's bridge with a voice not of desperation, but conviction. You do not understand what you carry, their leader said, his form shrouded by a hood of obsidian weave. You think you broke our king, but he chose this. His essence lives in your shield and through it in you. We do not come to slay you, Admiral Vane, we come to kneel. The words struck the bridge like a blade. Officers shifted uneasily. Some looked horrified, others lowered their heads as though the thought had already bloomed in secret corners of their hearts. Kalen's chest constricted. The hum of the shield rose behind him, low and steady, like the breath of something vast and waiting. "This is madness," he forced out, though the words tasted hollow. "The sovereign is dead. Your war is over." But even as he said it, the shield's surface caught the light of the stars, gleaming like molten silver. And Kalen thought, no, he felt a presence unfurling in the silence. The return answered not with words, but with fire. Dozens of ships surged forward, not in reckless rage, but in careful, deliberate formation. Their attacks fell upon the human fleet, precise and coordinated, as if guided by a hand unseen. The battle that followed was not like the skirmishes of scattered loyalists. It was a war reborn. The Resolute Dawn met them head-on, its shield blazing. Bolts of plasma split against the aegis, energy dispersing in showers of fractured light. Each impact sent a resonance rolling through the ship, a hum that grew louder with every strike. And then the voice came, not faint, not hidden. A voice that filled the Admiral's chest and poured into his skull, vast and undeniable. "They come for me, Kalen Vane. They come because I am not gone. You are my vessel. You are my hand. Do not deny what you already know. I endure." Kalen staggered, clutching the railing. His vision blurred. For an instant, the bridge dissolved into fire and shadow. He saw not his crew, but an army kneeling in endless ranks before him. He felt the weight of a crown on his brow, jagged, molten, heavy with grief. And when the vision shattered, his crew was staring at him. Some with concern, others with something like recognition. "Admiral," whispered his first officer, her voice trembling. Are you hearing it too?" The question froze Kalen's blood. He had not spoken of the voice to anyone. Yet here it was, spilling into the hearts of his officers, spreading like fire in dry grass. The battle raged outside, but the true war had begun within. The sovereign's return pressed harder, chanting through their open channels, their voices rising in eerie unison. The crown endures. The king endures. The shield is his throne. Each chant made the hum stronger until the very hull of the Resolute Dawn vibrated with it. Some crew dropped to their knees. Others shouted prayers. Order frayed at the edges, discipline tearing like fabric stretched too thin. Kalen barked commands, his voice hoarse, but every word sounded smaller than the chant, smaller than the hum. He could feel himself unraveling, his mind pulled between duty and something older, deeper, a gravity that was not his own. And then the shield flared. Light poured from the aegis, brighter than any weapon discharge, brighter than any star. It washed over the battlefield, silencing both fleets. For a single impossible heartbeat, every soldier, human, loyalist, cultist alike, saw the same vision. A throne of fire, a crown reforged, and a king waiting. When the light faded, silence fell. The return did not retreat. The human fleet did not advance. All eyes turned toward the Resolute Dawn, toward Kalen Vane. He stood rigid on the bridge, his chest heaving, his face pale. He could still feel the weight of that unseen crown pressing against his skull. The return hailed once more. "Do you see it now, Admiral?" the hooded leader asked, his voice trembling not with threat but with awe. "You do not fight us, you lead us." Kalen closed his eyes. The hum of the shield thrummed like a heartbeat in his bones, and in the silence that followed he knew with chilling certainty. The galaxy no longer saw him as a hero of humanity. They saw him as the vessel of a king. The fractured throne, the days after Verka stretched into an eternity of whispers. Kalen Vane sat in the solitude of his quarters, but solitude no longer meant silence. The shield hummed through the ship, and the hum had become a voice, sometimes a whisper in his dreams, sometimes a roar that rattled his bones awake. "You do not bear me, Kalen Vane. We bear each other. You are not consumed. You are crowned." He clenched his fists, nails carving crescents into his palms, fighting to hold on to the boundaries of his own mind. Yet each time he stared into the burnished silver curve of the aegis, he felt the lines blur. He remembered the chant, the kneeling soldiers, the awe in their eyes, and somewhere in the marrow of his being he understood. A symbol was no longer a shield. It was a throne. The crew had changed too. Discipline that once moved like clockwork now fractured into factions. Some still saluted their admiral with iron steadiness. Others bowed with subtle reverence, not to Kalen, but to something they believed within him. and some, like Commander Rel, began to question out loud what others dared not speak. One evening, in the dim blue light of the briefing chamber, Rel faced him across the table. "You felt it." "Sir," she said, her voice low, measured, but burning with restrained fear. "Don't deny it. The shield is more than metal. It's bleeding into us, into you. The fleet believes you're becoming him, and if they believe it long enough—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. The unspoken truth hung heavier than the stars outside. If humanity crowned Kalen in their hearts, willingly or not, the sovereign would never truly die. Kalen wanted to shout, to break the weight of her words, but the voice inside him pulsed like a second heartbeat. "Let them. They crave a throne. You are not chosen by chance." He dismissed the briefing abruptly, but Rel's eyes haunted him as much as the whispers did. The sovereign's return did not vanish after Verka. They shadowed the human fleet, never attacking outright, never retreating. They followed as pilgrims follow a holy relic, their fleets encircling the Resolute Dawn like guardians instead of predators. Messages streamed across every channel. Pleas, oaths, songs, of devotion to a king who now wore a human face. Kalen found himself reading them in the silence of night, not out of curiosity, but out of something darker, a pull. Our king is not flesh but flame. The shield is the altar, the admiral is the vessel. A broken crown is sharper than a whole one. Each word struck him deeper than enemy fire, because each word felt true. The breaking point came at the gathering of captains. The human fleet assembled aboard the Resolute Dawn, a storm of uniforms, voices, and unease. Kalen stood before them, the shield's glow visible through the viewport like an unblinking eye. "We are soldiers," he said, his voice carrying against the hush. "We are not prophets, not kings. The Dominion's reign ended at Darien's fall. Humanity will not replace one throne with another." Murmurs rose, but so did resistance. "You saw what we saw," one captain challenged, his voice edged with both fear and devotion. The vision wasn't lies. It was truth. A truth bigger than your denial. Bigger than us. Another captain slammed her fist against the table. "If we do not claim this power, the return will. If not you, Admiral, then who?" The chamber fractured into argument, shouts ricocheting like gunfire. Some demanded Kalen embrace the mantle. Others cursed the very idea. Unity, once humanity's greatest weapon, splintered before his eyes. Kalen's hand shook as he struck the table. Enough. The silence that followed was suffocating. Every eye locked on him. Every breath waited for his word. And in that silence, the voice filled him. Not a whisper this time, but a torrent. A firestorm that swallowed his fear. This is not burden. This is inheritance. A broken crown does not end a reign, it forges a stronger one. Speak, Kalen Vane, speak, and the galaxy kneels. His throat burned, his chest heaved. For one terrifying instant he wanted to obey. He wanted to let the words spill and end the war forever. Not as an admiral, but as a king reborn. But he saw Rel's face across the chamber. Unwavering, pleading. He forced the crown's fire down into his lungs until it was ash. "This shield," he said at last, his voice jagged, broken, "is not a throne. It is a warning. To our enemies, to our allies, to ourselves. If humanity kneels before it, then we are no better than those we broke." The chamber erupted again, not in unity, but in chaos. And Kalen realized with a shiver of dread that humanity was already splintering. That night, alone in his quarters, Kalen sank into his chair and stared at the distant curve of the shield. It pulsed faintly, like a star's heartbeat, like a crown breathing. "You will deny me until the end," the voice murmured, softer now, almost tender, "but you will not deny them. They will choose for you, and when they do, the broken crown will rise, not as mockery, but as destiny." Kalen closed his eyes. For the first time, he was no longer certain whether he feared the crown's power, or his own desire to wear it. When stars tremble. The fracture that had begun in whispers now split open like a wound no shield could mend. The Resolute Dawn drifted at the edge of the Perseid rift, its proud hull etched with the glow of the broken crown shield. Within its chambers, the fleet of humanity threatened to tear itself apart. Admiral Kalen Vane, once a figure of steady command, stood at the eye of a storm that no tactical brilliance could contain. His crew no longer moved as one, Their glances were fractured. Some turned toward him with loyalty, others with reverence, and others with doubt so sharp it could kill. The sovereign's return shadowed them still, not as predators now, but as shadows of faith, orbiting the Resolute Dawn like priests circling a temple. To them, the war was no longer for territory or power. It was for Kalen himself, the vessel of their broken king. The first breaking. The moment came not in battle, but in silence. A corvette of the human fleet, the Valor's Edge, refused an order. Its captain declared over open channels that the admiral was no longer merely a man, but the sovereign reborn, and that obedience to Kalen was not military discipline, but sacred duty. Half the fleet condemned him. Half hesitated. Kalen stood on the bridge, his fists trembling as the voices of his captains collided in chaos. "You can't ignore this any longer." "Sir?" Commander Rell said, her voice hard but heavy with sorrow. "Your silence is tearing us apart more than any enemy fire could. If you don't declare yourself—" "They'll do it for you." Her words cut deeper than she knew, for the truth was already unfolding. The fleet was becoming two fleets. One fighting for humanity's survival, the other kneeling for a crown reforged in fire. And in that moment of collapse, the sovereign's voice surged within him, clearer, louder than ever. "This is not weakness, Kalen Vane. This is ascension. Do not resist what is already written in their hearts. I am not their tyrant, I am their shield. Through you they rise." The admiral's knees almost buckled beneath the weight of it. For one terrible heartbeat he wanted to surrender, not out of weariness, but because the words felt true. The rift opens as if to mirror their fracture. The stars themselves trembled. From the depths of the Persid rift, a storm of dark matter surged like a tide of shadow. The Return's prophets had long whispered that the rift was the wound where their sovereign's soul bled into the void. Now it seethed open, swallowing light, and out of it came ships. Not dominion, not human, but something twisted. War constructs that had drifted in the dark for centuries. Abandoned relics of the Dominion's oldest wars. Now awakened by the echo of the crown. Their hulls bore no banners, but their weapons lit the rift with fire enough to blind. The human fleet and the Return alike reeled in shock as the constructs descended. Neither side had expected this. Neither side was ready, but both turned their eyes to the same point, the Resolute Dawn and the shield that burned brighter than a star. A terrible choice. Kalen's officers looked to him. The Return's fleets, too, fell into formation, as if waiting for his command. Two armies, once enemies, suspended in a single breath, caught between annihilation and faith. His comms erupted with voices. "Admiral, give the order." "We'll fight." "No! You must lead us as sovereign. Command them all. Humanity bows to no crown. Better a crown than extinction." Their words blurred into a storm. Kalen staggered forward, staring at the shield through the viewport. It pulsed, alive, answering the fire of the oncoming constructs with a heat that sang in his veins. "Claim them," the voice urged, thunder rolling through his soul. "Not as slaves, as children. They will follow. They will survive. And you, Kalen Vane, will no longer be Admiral of the Broken. You will be King of the Living." For a heartbeat, the galaxy seemed to balance on a blade. If he raised the shield as sovereign, both fleets would kneel, and together they might survive the rift's onslaught. But in doing so, he would end humanity's freedom forever. If he denied it, if he clung to his oath as admiral, the fleets would shatter, divided before the constructs, and all would die. The shield pulsed again, as if impatient for his answer. Kalen Vane closed his eyes, and for the first time, he did not know whether he was choosing between two futures, or between himself and something far greater than him. The crown of ash and fire. The Perseid rift burned with a light no star had ever given. The ancient constructs poured from the wound in space, colossal machines forged by the Dominion in ages past, their jagged hulls blackened by centuries of slumber. They moved like titans unbound, their weapons igniting the void in arcs of violet flame. The human fleet scattered. The Return, for all their zeal, faltered. And at the center, unmoving, stood the Resolute Dawn, its shield glowing like the last ember of a dying universe. On the bridge, Kalen Vane felt the weight of every gaze, every prayer, every curse. The crown's voice thundered through his veins, no longer whispering but commanding, each word a tide against his will. You hesitate, and they die. You kneel to your fear and the galaxy burns. Choose Kalen Vane's shield, or throne. The first blow of Construct's lance struck the Valor's edge, shattering it into molten fragments. The shockwave rattled the Resolute Dawn to its bones. Screams filled the comms, and with them, please, Admiral, save us. Sovereign, lead us. Kalen! He staggered forward, clutching the railing, his mind torn between duty and destiny. The shield pulsed harder, light bleeding into the bridge until every shadow vanished, and then he raised his hand. The Aegis answered. A wave of brilliance exploded outward, slamming into the oncoming constructs. Their fire bent away, absorbed, twisted, thrown back upon them. For a moment, humanity's fleets and the return alike saw what no weapon had ever done. The shield not as defense, but as judgment. The constructs fell back, their hulls cracking under the reflected fire, and in that blinding instant silence swept both fleets. Not one voice dared speak, because all knew what they had seen. The shield had crowned him. The coronation. No one spoke. Kalen's officers dropped to their knees. Not all at once, not in unison, but enough to tear his heart open. Commander Rel stood rigid, her eyes wet with fury and grief. Outside, the return roared in unison across the comms, their chants echoing like thunder. Sovereign reborn. The crown endures. Kalen wanted to deny it, to say he was still only Admiral. But the truth was carved into light itself. He had wielded the shield not as a man, but as something more. And the fleets no longer saw him as Kalen Vane. They saw a king. The turning of the rift. The constructs rallied, surging again, more furious, more relentless. The rift pulsed, alive with the echo of war. Kalen's breath came ragged, his body trembling under the weight of the crown that no one could see but everyone felt. The voice pressed harder. Do not resist me. We are not tyrant, we are shield. Not throne, but refuge. Take them all into your fire and none will fall. He looked at the faces of his crew, the loyal, the fearful, the kneeling. He looked at the return, fleets that had once bled humanity dry, now waiting on his command. And he understood with a clarity that broke him. The crown was not asking. It was inevitable. He raised the shield again. Light ripped across the void, a dome of fire encasing both fleets. The constructs struck, but their power melted against the Aegis. For the first time in centuries, human and Dominion ships fought side by side, bound not by treaty, but by one man's unwilling coronation. The rift screamed. Stars trembled. The battle turned. The cost, but every surge of light carved something from him. Kalen felt his flesh weaken, his veins burn, his mind blur. The shield was not a tool. It was a crown forged in agony. To wield it as throne was to bleed one's soul into its fire. With every wave, the constructs fell, and with every wave, Kalen knew he was less Kalen Vane, more sovereign. His last clear sight was of Commander Rel. She stood unbowed, her eyes locked on his with a fury that was not hatred, but mourning. As if she already saw the man she had followed vanishing beneath the weight of a broken crown. The aftermath, when the rift quieted, when the last construct drifted into silence, the fleets did not cheer. They bowed. Every vessel, human and Dominion alike, turned its lights toward the Resolute Dawn, a gesture older than memory, older than nations. The gesture of subjects to a king. Kalen collapsed to his knees, his chest heaving, the shield's glow dimming to a steady, terrible heartbeat. And in the silence that followed, the voice whispered, no longer thunder, but something almost tender. Now they live. Now they kneel. You are not Kalen Vane. You are the crown that broke to shield them all. The shield that was a throne. The rift lay in silence. Its last echoes flickered across the void, shards of broken constructs tumbling into endless dark. The fleets that had gathered for annihilation now floated like pilgrims outside a ruined temple, their guns quiet, their engines dim. Their eyes turned to one ship, the Resolute Dawn. It no longer gleamed with the pristine silver of human steel. Its hull was charred, its plating cracked, and where the great shield had once burned as a star, now it pulsed faintly, a dying ember. Yet no gaze could turn away. For within that ember was Kalen Vane, the man who was no longer a man. He stood at the bridge's center, or what remained of him. His form was still flesh, but threaded with light, veins etched in molten fire, eyes glowing faintly with the crown's memory. He swayed with each breath as though a wind no one else could feel pressed against him. The crews whispered, not daring to speak aloud. Is he alive? Is he sovereign? What have we made? Commander Rel approached him slowly, her boots heavy on the scorched metal floor. She had not knelt, not once, not even when the shield's fire crowned him before thousands. Her loyalty had never been to thrones, Kalen, she whispered, her voice breaking. What are you now? His lips parted. The answer trembled in the air, but no word came, only a faint smile of exhaustion, of defiance, of grief. The choice given to the galaxy across the comms, leaders and captains argued, their voices colliding like storms. He is sovereign. The shield has chosen, cried the return, their voices choked with rapture. The throne lives again through him. No, barked the human admirals. He is Kalen Vane, Admiral of Earth, savior of us all. To call him king is to betray the blood we shed against crowns. Yet in the silence between their clashing words, every soldier, every pilot, every refugee knew the truth. What they had seen could not be erased. He had not led as an admiral. He had not fought as a soldier. He had borne the fire of gods and survived. And whether he willed it or not, no throne in the galaxy was safe now. The last act of defiance, Kalen drew a final breath, and the glow around him flared, not as blinding fire, but as soft radiance like dawn seeping through broken shutters. His voice came ragged but steady, carried across every channel, every ear, every soul. I'm no king, the return wailed in anguish. The humans cried in denial. I am no sovereign. No throne will rise from me. What I carried was never a crown. It was a shield. And so long as I breathe, it will remain so. The shield pulsed once, brighter, brighter still, until its light consumed the bridge. And then, like a star collapsing, it broke. The aegis of Theros shattered into 1,000 fragments, scattering across the void like silver tears. Each shard drifted between the fleets, glowing faintly, unclaimed by throne or temple. Kalen fell, his body crumpling at Rel's feet, the glow fading from his skin, and silence claimed the galaxy. The aftermath, no one crowned him. No one dared. The shield was gone, its power dissolved into fragments that neither man nor dominion could command. Some shards were gathered as relics, carried into shrines, whispered over in prayer. Others were forged into weapons, talismans, heirlooms, but never again did they unite into one. The crown was broken forever, and Kalen Vane, Admiral, Shield-bearer, almost king, was laid to rest not beneath a throne, but beneath the stars he had shielded. The legacy years passed. Wars came and went, but the memory endured. Children grew up hearing of the man who turned a crown into a shield, who bore the weight of sovereignty and refused it. To allies, he was a reminder that no empire was unassailable. To enemies, he was a warning. Humanity's defiance could burn even kings to ash. The galaxy whispered of Kalen Vane not as sovereign, not as admiral, but as something rarer. A man who chose to be human when he could have been God. The final image, and so the fleets, scattered now into legend, remembered the sight that would never fade. A lone ship, burning at the edge of the rift. A shield forged from a broken crown, raised not to rule but to protect. A man standing between throne and grave and choosing neither. The broken crown that became a shield, and through it a story too powerful for any empire to silence.